The US government is selling a decommissioned Cold War bunker for less than a house. Here's how to buy it. But here's what nobody tells you. The government isn't just selling these bunkers to doomsday preppers and survivalists. They're selling them to everyday Americans who have absolutely no idea what they're walking into. And I'm not talking about the purchase price. I'm talking about the invisible costs, the legal landmines, and the one decision you'll have to make before you ever sign the paperwork that will determine whether this becomes the best investment of your life or the most expensive mistake you never saw coming. Stay with me, because at the end of this video, I'm going to reveal exactly what that decision is. And it's something that will change how you think about these properties forever. If you're new here, hit subscribe and drop a comment right now. I want to know, have you ever considered buying a piece of Cold War history? Or does the idea terrify you? Seriously? Let me know in the comment section. Your answer might just help me create the exact video you're looking for. Wait, this part is important. Before we dive into the specific properties and the purchasing process, you need to understand something that 99% of bunker buyers completely overlook. And that's exactly why I created my comprehensive guide on decommissioned federal properties and how to identify the ones worth buying. The guide walks you through the hidden evaluation criteria, the red flags that kill deals, and the contract language that most buyers miss entirely. It's available in the description and pinned to the top of the comments. It goes far deeper than what I can cover here. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in the government surplus market right now. The number of decommissioned military bunkers and Cold War structures being released for civilian purchase has tripled in the last 5 years. And the reason is simpler than you'd think. It costs the federal government money to maintain these properties. They're paying security, paying utilities on empty buildings, paying for environmental monitoring. So they'd rather pass the burden to a private citizen. The catch? You're not just buying a building, you're inheriting a piece of classified history. Let me introduce you to the first property that illustrates this perfectly. It's a decommissioned ICBM silo complex in Nebraska. Yes, an actual missile silo. Listed at just $8,950. On the surface, that sounds incredible. 12,000 square feet of underground space, blast-proof construction, built to withstand a nuclear strike. The walls are 7 feet of reinforced concrete. The structural integrity is essentially eternal. But here's what the listing doesn't tell you. This particular silo was decommissioned in 1997, which means it spent 26 years exposed to water infiltration, concrete degradation, and environmental contamination. The soil around the silo was contaminated with residual fuel and hydraulic fluid from the launch mechanisms. The government did minimal cleanup before putting it on the market. So yes, you can buy it for $89,000. But you're going to spend another $2 to $4.000 remediating the environmental damage before you can even think about living there. And that's if you don't hit additional complications. The second property I want to show you is even more instructive. It's a former communications bunker in West Virginia, one of those Cold War structures built specifically to house government officials in case of nuclear war. The listing price is $4.7,200, less than a used car. The building contains multiple levels, hundreds of feet of reinforced tunnels, and emergency power systems that are theoretically still functional. But here's the part that changes everything. When the government decommissioned this bunker, they didn't remove the asbestos. They didn't remove the lead-based paint. They didn't remove the PCBs from the old electrical transformers. All of that, every single molecule of those materials, is still inside those concrete walls. Federal law requires you to hire certified abatement contractors to remove it. We're talking about $1.50,000 to $3.000.000 in specialized remediation depending on the square footage. And if you decide to skip that step and just leave it there, congratulations, you now own a Superfund liability. The EPA can hold you personally responsible for environmental violations, and fines can exceed $5.000 per day. This is why the secret I promised you at the beginning matters so much. Because before you ever decide to buy one of these properties, you need to understand that there are actually two completely different market segments here, and most people confuse them. On one side, you have the contaminated properties, the ones with asbestos, lead paint, radioactive materials embedded in the structure itself. Those are the ones that will drain your bank account before you ever pour a single foundation. On the other side, you have the structurally sound decommissioned bunkers and Cold War facilities that have already been partially decontaminated by the government before sale. The difference in final cost can be anywhere from $2,000 to over $1 million, and almost nobody knows which category they're actually buying into until it's too late. So let me break down exactly which bunkers are actually worth your money right now. The first category is what I call the already clean bunkers. These are facilities that the Department of Defense or the General Services Administration, the GSA, which handles government surplus, has already run through environmental remediation before listing them for public sale. The government did the hard, expensive work. You're inheriting a structure that's been certified by federal inspectors as safe for habitation or repurposing. There's still renovation work ahead, absolutely. But you're not fighting an EPA bureaucracy or paying for hazmat teams. Here's an example that just hit the market 3 months ago in rural West Virginia. It's a former Soviet monitoring station from the 1960s, a 2-level underground facility with about 3.200 square feet of reinforced concrete space. The government's initial asking price was $9.9.00. Now, that sounds incredible until you dig into the actual condition report. The bunker itself is structurally sound. No asbestos findings in the inspection, no radioactive contamination. But here's the catch. There's no running water down there, no electrical infrastructure. The ventilation system hasn't been maintained since 1991. The renovation estimate to make that livable, we're talking electrical work, plumbing installation, HVAC system replacement, structural reinforcement for modern building codes, runs about $3.20 to $3.80. So your actual all-in cost is closer to $4.70.00, which is still below the median home price in most of America. But it requires you to understand that the $8.9.00 listing price is only the first domino. You're signing up for a serious construction project, not a move-in ready home. Now compare that to the second category, what I call the liability bunkers. These are the properties where the government either couldn't afford the remediation cost or the contamination was so severe that they decided to just sell it off as is and let the buyer deal with it. I found one in upstate New York, a former Air Force radar station listed for $3.4 billion. The initial appeal is obvious. You're buying a massive structure for less than a decent used truck. But the environmental report, and I'm reading directly from the GSA listing here, flagged residual beryllium oxide contamination in the equipment vaults and potential lead chromate in underground piping systems. Beryllium oxide. That's a material that was used in some Cold War-era electronics and weapons components. When it breaks down or corrodes, the particles become airborne. If you inhale it, you develop chronic beryllium disease, a progressive lung condition with no cure. The EPA doesn't just ask you to remove it nicely. They require encapsulation or full excavation depending on the concentration levels. For this particular property, the initial abatement quote came back at $2.80.00. So that $3.4.500 bargain turns into a $3.14.500 commitment before you've even thought about renovation. And here's the part that most people miss, the timeline. Abatement work like that doesn't happen in weeks. It takes months, sometimes longer if the EPA steps in with additional testing requirements. You're carrying the property taxes, the insurance, and the liability the entire time you're waiting for permits and contractors. Before we continue, keep this in mind for a second. The difference between buying smart in this space and buying blind is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is exactly why our complete guide to decommissioned Cold War properties goes so deep into environmental due diligence. It breaks down how to read an EPA report, what questions to ask the GSA before you even place a bid, and which third-party environmental firms charge fair rates versus which ones will upcharge you because they know you're desperate. That guide is in the description, and it's the resource I recommend you grab if you're seriously considering one of these properties. Because making the wrong choice here doesn't just cost money, it can cost years of your life dealing with legal and environmental headaches. So given all of that, which bunkers are actually selling right now? And more importantly, which ones are worth your attention? There's a converted Nike missile launch facility near Chicago, built in 1958, still mostly underground. The asking price is $56,000, structurally sound. Environmental report is clean, but it's a shallow facility, only about 1,500 square feet across 2 chambers. The previous owner tried to convert it into a residential bunker retreat and got about 60% through before running out of money. The electrical work is partially done. Plumbing is roughed in. That actually cuts your renovation timeline in half. Estimated completion cost to finish the job and make it code compliant, around $1.80,000 to $2.20,000. Total all-in investment, $36.00 to $3.76.00. You're getting a finished property with a unique history and built-in resilience features for the price of a modest home in the Midwest. That's the advantage of the second owner play in this market. Someone else already absorbed the initial shock of the purchase price and did some of the heavy lifting. You're buying their sweat equity at a significant discount. Then there's what I call the preservation play, and this one's different because it's not about living in the bunker. It's about preserving it as a historical landmark while the property itself becomes income-generating real estate. There's a decommissioned Atlas missile silo in southern Kansas that hit the market last year for $3.20,000. Full underground complex, missile launch tube still intact. The current owner is restoring it as a Cold War museum that operates seasonally, generating about $4.5 in annual revenue through tours and educational programming. The property itself is in a rural area where land is cheap, so the remaining acreage is leased to local farmers for $2.00 a year. Between the museum revenue and the land lease, the property is cash flow positive within the first 2 years. That's a completely different approach. You're not trying to convert the bunker into your personal underground mansion. You're treating it as a business asset. And honestly, from a financial perspective, it makes more sense for most people. The renovation costs are lower because you're not retrofitting everything for daily living. You're creating a visitor-safe environment with proper signage, basic utilities, and historical context. Your liability exposure is actually lower because you're operating under a museum or heritage site designation, which comes with specific legal protections and insurance products designed for exactly that use case. The economics of these different approaches are completely different. And I think that's the missing piece in most conversations about buying decommissioned bunkers. People see the headline price, bunker for $5.00, and they imagine themselves living underground in some kind of doomsday fantasy. But they never do the math on what it actually costs to make that happen. Let me show you the 3 financial models that actually work in this market right now. Model 1 is the pure renovation play. You buy a structurally sound, environmentally clean bunker for between $4 in 000 and $1.50. You invest $2.00 to $4.00 in renovation and modernization. Your all-in cost is $2.40,000 to $5.50,000. You end up with a completely unique, highly resilient residential property in a rural or semi-rural location. Your resale value is typically 15 to 25% above your all-in cost, assuming the market for alternative real estate remains steady. That's not a home run investment, but it's a solid arbitrage play if you can do some of the work yourself or have construction experience. Model 2 is the dual purpose play. You buy the property, you invest in partial renovation, making certain sections livable or operational while leaving other sections as museum or commercial space. Your renovation cost is 30 to 40% lower because you're not coding out the entire facility for residential use. You generate revenue through tours, events, storage rental, or other commercial uses. Your all-in cost might be $3.00 to $6.00, but you're generating $3.00 to $8.00 in annual revenue, which means your payback period is much shorter. Model 3 is the land play. You're not actually interested in the bunker itself. You're buying the property because it comes with significant acreage, often 10 to 50 acres, in areas where land is currently undervalued. The bunker is just the unusual feature that makes the property attractive enough for a lifestyle buyer to pay attention. You can sublease portions of the land, operate a small farm or solar installation, or simply hold it for appreciation. Your all-in cost is $6.00 to $2.00. but you're also acquiring significant land assets that appreciate independently of the bunker. The critical mistake I see people make is confusing these models. They buy a property planning for Model 1, but it's actually better suited for Model 2. Or they invest $2,001,000 in residential renovation for a property that would generate 3 times the return if they converted it to a heritage site instead. The numbers completely change based on your actual use case and your market position. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning, and it's the one thing that separates the buyers who walk away with a steal from those who end up underwater on their investment. Most people see a decommissioned Cold War bunker and they immediately think residential. They imagine living in it, showing it off, maybe writing a book about it. That's not wrong, but it's also not the whole picture. The real money, and I mean the real opportunity, is in understanding which model that specific bunker actually fits before you sign anything. The government doesn't market these the way a real estate agent would. There are no brochures, there are no glossy websites. The bunker I mentioned earlier, the one in Kentucky listed for $1,068,000, sat on GSA auctions for 3 months with minimal traffic because most people simply don't know it exists. You found it because you were looking, because you did the research. That's your first advantage right there. But here's what happens next. Once you understand the 3 models, once you've done the site survey, once you've calculated your actual hold costs and renovation expenses, now you're operating in a different league than the casual browser. You're not competing with dreamers, you're competing with serious investors who see spreadsheets instead of Instagram moments. And in that market, the deals still exist. They're just smaller. They require more patience. They demand that you ask better questions up front. The bunker in West Virginia that I mentioned, the one with the water system already installed and the thermal mass already built in, that property will appreciate. Not because the bunker itself becomes fashionable, not because you renovate it into a Netflix-ready tiny home. It will appreciate because you're buying a fully functional, hardened structure on rural land, and that combination gets rarer every year. Fewer of these assets exist. More people want them. That's basic supply and demand. And the government is liquidating them because they don't fit the military's mission anymore, not because they don't have value. So what should you actually do right now? First, get serious about your intention. Write it down. Are you building a primary residence, a second property, an income stream, a preservation project? Your answer determines everything that comes next. Second, visit the GSA auctions website and filter by the states and property types I mentioned. Spend an hour looking at active listings. You'll be surprised at what's available. Third, and this is non-negotiable, get a boots-on-the-ground inspection before you commit to any purchase. A 3D listing photo is not the same as standing in a bunker tunnel and feeling the walls. Humidity, structural cracks, water intrusion, air quality, you need to know these things in person. Fourth, budget conservatively. If you think renovation will cost $5.0.000, assume $7.5.00. If you think permitting will take 6 months, assume a year. Government property sales come with invisible friction, and friction costs money. Fifth, connect with a real estate attorney who has experience with government surplus properties. They'll navigate the GSA process, flag title issues you would miss, and protect you from the common pitfalls that torpedo deals. This is not the place to save $2 on legal fees. And sixth, and I mean this genuinely, consider whether this is actually the right move for you. Buying a decommissioned Cold War bunker is not conventional. It's not for people who want to follow the standard real estate playbook. If you're excited about the history, the uniqueness, the challenge, the resilience angle, yes, move forward. If you're doing it because you saw a viral video and it seemed cool, hit pause. These properties reward commitment and vision. They punish indecision and shortcuts. The government is quietly liquidating these structures because the Cold War ended. The bunkers remain, and for the next few years, maybe 5, maybe 10, there's still a window where you can acquire them at prices that feel almost absurd. Once these properties become mainstream knowledge, once HGTV does a series about bunker conversions, and hedge fund managers start treating them like an alternative asset class, the prices will shift, the deals will evaporate, the window will close. You've been watching someone break down the real mechanics behind how these transactions work. You've seen the models, you've heard the numbers, you've understood the hidden framework that separates a steal from a mistake. So here's what I want from you. Take one action this week. Visit GSA auctions. Look at 3 properties that interest you. Write down their condition, their location, their price. Calculate what the renovation might cost in your state. Then ask yourself honestly, is this something I'm actually going to pursue, or am I just daydreaming? There's nothing wrong with either answer, but clarity matters more than fantasy. The decommissioned Cold War bunker market is one of the last remaining inefficiencies in real estate. The government is selling assets that took billions to build for pennies on the dollar. You now understand why. You now know how to evaluate them. You now have a framework that actually works. The only question left is whether you're ready to move. Thank you so much for watching. If you found value in understanding how these government property deals actually work, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss when we drop a new property or new strategy. And leave a comment below. Tell me, would you actually live in one of these bunkers, or would you treat it as an investment? I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know how you'd approach this opportunity. See you in the next one. End of script, part 3 of 3.